Smoke rolled across the hills like an unstoppable tide, darkening the horizon and choking the air with a bitter tang. The crackling roar of flames consumed the silence, a constant, menacing reminder of nature's fury. Los Angeles was no stranger to wildfires, but this one was different. It spread faster, burned hotter, and the fierce winds carried embers farther than ever before, igniting chaos across the suburban sprawl. Angelina Jolie adjusted the scarf tied tightly around her face, her sharp eyes scanning the ash-filled street. She had been visiting a shelter for displaced families when the first plumes of smoke had risen in the distance. Within hours, the wildfire had grown into a ravenous monster, consuming homes and forcing thousands to flee. The evacuation was chaotic, with gridlocked roads and frightened families abandoning vehicles to escape on foot. Yet, even amidst the panic, Angelina's instincts drove her toward the danger rather than away from it. Her charity work had brought her to the neighborhood, and she had no intention of leaving until every person and every animal was safe. She pulled a walkie-talkie from her bag and pressed the button. "This is Angelina. Does anyone copy? I'm near Elmwood Drive in Franklin. Over." Static hissed for a moment before a voice broke through. "This is Fire Department Unit 7. Elmwood is being evacuated. The fire's too close. You need to leave the area immediately." Angelina frowned. "I've got reports of families still here. I'm checking house by house." She didn't wait for the dispatcher's response before clipping the walkie-talkie to her belt and moving forward. The heat was oppressive, radiating off the asphalt in waves as the smoke stung her eyes. A sharp bark cut through the cacophony, drawing her attention. She turned to see a German shepherd standing in the middle of the road, its fur streaked with ash, but its eyes bright and alert. The dog barked again, looking straight at her before running a few steps and stopping to look back. It was as if the animal was urging her to follow. Angelina didn't hesitate. "All right, boy. Show me where." The German shepherd led her to a modest single-story home, its front yard littered with fallen branches and debris. The dog pawed at the door, whining urgently. Angelina approached, her heart pounding as she knocked and called out, "Is anyone inside? This is an emergency. You need to evacuate." Faint cries answered from within. Without waiting, Angelina tried the door handle. Locked. She scanned the area and spotted a garden ornament, a heavy stone frog. Grabbing it, she smashed the glass pane near the handle and reached through to unlock the door. Inside, the heat was stifling, and smoke curled along the ceiling. A woman and a young boy huddled in the corner of the living room, their faces streaked with soot. "Come on," Angelina urged, rushing to them. She helped the woman to her feet while the dog nudged the boy, guiding him toward the door. "We need to move now." Outside, the flames had crept closer, the air filled with flying embers. Angelina shielded the family as they ran to the street. The German shepherd stayed at their heels, barking to keep them moving. When they reached a safer distance, the woman collapsed onto the curb, clutching her son. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at Angelina. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Angelina knelt beside her, gripping her shoulder. "You're safe now. There's a fire crew on the way. Stay here and wait for them." As the family caught their breath, Angelina turned to the dog. He sat a few feet away, his tongue lolling but his posture alert, as if awaiting further instructions. "You're incredible," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "What's your name, boy?" The dog had no collar, no tags. It dawned on her that he might have been left behind during the evacuation, just another casualty of the chaos. But he was no ordinary stray. His actions had saved lives, and Angelina felt an instant bond with him. "Max," she decided. "That suits you." Max barked in approval, his tail wagging briefly before he stilled again, his ears pricking toward the sound of distant sirens. He rose to his feet and nudged Angelina's leg, as if to say their work wasn't done yet. "You're right," she said, standing. "Let's go." Together, they moved deeper into the neighborhood, where more lives hung in the balance, and the fire's fury showed no signs of abating. Angelina Jolie tightened her grip on Max's leash, a makeshift cord she had fashioned from a discarded length of rope she found along the way. The German shepherd, seemingly tireless despite the oppressive heat, led her with purposeful strides through the smoke-choked streets. Around them, the fire raged unabated, devouring entire rows of houses, trees, and vehicles in its path. The roar of the flames was deafening, but it couldn't drown out the sound of distant cries for help. "Max, do you hear that?" Angelina crouched and placed her hand on his head. His ears twitched as his eyes locked on a narrow alleyway between two burning apartment buildings. With a single bark, he darted forward, dragging Angelina along. The alley was a nightmare of heat and ash, but at the end of it, a figure emerged, a man limping and struggling to carry an unconscious woman over his shoulder. Angelina rushed to him, steadying his burden before it toppled them both. She collapsed. The man gasped, his voice raw from inhaling smoke. "I couldn't leave her behind." "You did the right thing," Angelina assured him. "Let me help." Together, they maneuvered the unconscious woman to a safer spot, where the air was marginally clearer. Angelina checked her pulse and breathing. It was faint but steady. She pulled a water bottle from her pack and dribbled some onto the woman's lips, coaxing her back to consciousness. "Can you walk?" Angelina asked as the woman's eyes fluttered open. The woman nodded weakly, though her legs trembled when she tried to stand. Angelina slung an arm around her shoulders, providing support as the group pressed on. Max led the way, his sharp instincts guiding them past collapsing structures and patches of fire blocking their path. As they reached an open area, Angelina spotted a fire crew battling a wall of flames near the edge of the neighborhood. She waved her arms, signaling them. Two firefighters broke away and sprinted toward her group, their protective gear making them look like beacons of hope amid the chaos. "Over here," one of them called, motioning for Angelina and the others to move toward a designated evacuation zone. The firefighters took over, guiding the injured man and woman toward safety. Angelina paused for a moment, catching her breath and assessing her surroundings. Max stood at her side, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the fire loomed closer. "Good boy," she whispered, stroking his soot-covered fur. But there was no time to rest. Another explosion echoed in the distance, followed by a plume of smoke and ash that darkened the sky even further. A storage facility had caught fire, and the flames were threatening to spread to a nearby hospital. Angelina grabbed her walkie-talkie. "This is Angelina. I'm heading toward the medical center on Elmwood. The fire's closing in, and there are patients who can't be moved. Is anyone responding?" The reply crackled through the static. "Negative. All units are tied up. We're trying to contain the spread, but resources are stretched thin." Her jaw tightened. "Understood. I'll do what I can." Max barked, as if to say, "Let's go." The hospital was a few blocks away, but the journey felt like miles. The closer they got, the hotter the air became, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to smolder. By the time they arrived, the situation was dire. The parking lot was filled with ambulances that hadn't been able to leave, their tires melted into the asphalt. Inside, patients and staff huddled together, their faces etched with fear. "Is anyone in charge here?" Angelina called out as she entered. A nurse stepped forward, her face streaked with sweat and soot. "We've got critical patients who can't be moved without proper transport, but the roads are blocked, and we're running out of time." Angelina's mind raced. "We'll create a firebreak. Start moving those who can walk to the far side of the building. I'll find a way to hold the flames back until help arrives." The nurse hesitated but saw the determination in Angelina's eyes and nodded. Max sprang into action alongside Angelina, guiding patients toward the safer side of the hospital while she coordinated with staff to create makeshift barriers. Using fire extinguishers, wet blankets, and anything else they could find, they fought to buy time. As the fire closed in, Angelina spotted an emergency water tank on the hospital's roof. If she could find a way to release it, the water might flood the perimeter and slow the fire's advance. "Max, stay here," she commanded, though she hated leaving him. Climbing the fire escape, she reached the roof and found the tank. It was old and rusted, but it might just work. Using a crowbar she had picked up earlier, she pried open the release valve. A torrent of water gushed out, cascading down the sides of the building and dousing the flames below. The fire hissed and sputtered as it met the water, and for a moment, the inferno seemed to retreat. Back on the ground, Angelina rejoined Max and the staff. Cheers broke out as the immediate danger passed, but Angelina knew it was only a temporary reprieve. "We need to evacuate now," she urged the nurse. Before long, a convoy of fire trucks and emergency vehicles arrived, finally clearing a path for the hospital's patients and staff to escape. Angelina stayed behind, helping load the last of the patients onto the ambulances. As the convoy rolled out, she turned to Max. His fur was singed, and he was clearly exhausted, but his spirit remained unbroken. "You did good, Max," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He wagged his tail once, then nudged her hand, ready for whatever came next. The fire still burned in the distance, and there were more lives to save. Without hesitation, Angelina and Max set off once more, heading deeper into the inferno. Angelina and Max pressed on, weaving through the desolate streets as the wildfire advanced with terrifying speed. The once vibrant neighborhood was now an apocalyptic wasteland. Smoke-filled skies blotted out the sun, and the oppressive heat made every breath feel like inhaling fire. As they moved, Max suddenly stopped, his ears swiveling. He barked sharply, then bolted toward a cluster of homes that were partially engulfed in flames. Angelina sprinted after him, her boots crunching on scorched debris. When she reached the source of Max's urgency, she heard it too. Faint cries for help coming from a house whose front door was blocked by a fallen tree. The flames had crept dangerously close to the structure, and the windows glowed ominously with the reflection of the fire. "Is anyone in there?" Angelina shouted, trying to pinpoint the voice. "Help! We're upstairs," a man's voice called back, hoarse and panicked. Angelina quickly assessed the situation. The tree was too large to move on her own, and time was running out. She spotted a back entrance and called to Max, "Let's try the other way." The back door was unlocked, but the interior was a maze of thick smoke. Angelina pulled her scarf tighter over her face and dropped to her knees, crawling under the worst of the haze. Max stayed close, his keen senses guiding them toward the staircase. Upstairs, they found a father clutching his two young daughters, their faces pale with fear. The girls clung to his arms as he shielded them from the worst of the smoke. "We're here to get you out," Angelina said, keeping her voice calm despite the urgency pounding in her chest. "Can you carry one of them? I'll take the other." The man nodded, his movements shaky but determined. Angelina scooped up the younger girl, who whimpered softly but didn't resist. Max barked, signaling the path back down as they retraced their steps. Just as they reached the back door, a loud crash behind them signaled the collapse of part of the ceiling. Flames roared through the space, and the heat intensified. Angelina pushed the family forward. "Run! Get as far as you can!" Outside, they stumbled into the fresh air, coughing and gasping. Angelina set the girl down and turned to make sure Max was with her. He emerged moments later, his fur singed but otherwise unharmed. The father dropped to his knees, clutching his daughters tightly. "I thought we were going to die in there," he said, his voice breaking. "You're safe now," Angelina assured him. "Stay here and wait for rescue. They'll be here soon." As she spoke, a new threat emerged. A propane tank in a nearby yard exploded, sending a shockwave through the street. Angelina instinctively shielded the family, while Max barked in alarm. The explosion reignited nearby flames, and Angelina knew they couldn't linger. She urged the father and his daughters to move farther away, pointing them toward a group of evacuees who had gathered near an emergency shelter. Once they were safely on their way, Angelina crouched beside Max. "It's getting worse," she murmured, brushing soot from his face. "We can't stop now." Max wagged his tail weakly, ready to follow her lead. The duo continued deeper into the chaos, their determination unwavering. They passed abandoned cars, overturned trash bins, and the eerie sight of melted playground equipment. Each corner they turned revealed more destruction, and more people in desperate need of help. At one point, they encountered an elderly couple trapped in their car, the engine dead and the door stuck. Angelina smashed the driver's side window with a nearby rock and helped them climb out, guiding them to safety before the fire consumed their vehicle. Later, they found a group of teenagers attempting to douse flames near their home with garden hoses. Angelina convinced them to abandon their efforts, explaining that their lives were more important than the house they were trying to save. As night fell, the fire cast an eerie orange glow over the city. Exhaustion gnawed at Angelina's limbs, but she pushed forward, knowing that every second mattered. Max stayed by her side, his loyalty and courage unshakable. At one point, they reached a small community park where a group of families had taken refuge, their terrified faces illuminated by the glow of the encroaching flames. Angelina rallied them, organizing an impromptu evacuation plan. She coordinated with those who had vehicles, loading children and the elderly into the safest cars, while others prepared to leave on foot. "Stick together," she urged them. "Head east toward the freeway. Emergency services are setting up a safe zone there." As the group began their trek, Angelina stayed behind to ensure no one was left behind. Max sniffed the air, his body tense as he watched the families disappear into the distance. For a moment, the street was eerily quiet, save for the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of sirens. Angelina knelt beside Max, her hand resting on his back. "We've done good so far," she said softly. "But it's not over yet." Max licked her hand, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. The night stretched on, and Angelina knew that the battle was far from won. Together, she and Max turned toward the heart of the inferno, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fire had grown into an unrelenting behemoth, devouring everything in its path. As the wind picked up, it carried sparks and embers to ignite new fires ahead of the main blaze, creating a deadly labyrinth of danger for anyone who remained behind. Yet Angelina and Max pressed on, their mission clear: save as many lives as possible before it was too late. The night air was thick with smoke, reducing visibility to only a few feet. The acrid scent burned Angelina's throat and made her eyes water, but she refused to slow down. Max walked beside her, his ears perked and his nose twitching, constantly alert for signs of distress. He had proven himself to be an invaluable partner, his instincts leading them to people in need time and time again. As they rounded a corner, they came across a group of firefighters struggling to control a particularly aggressive section of the blaze. Their faces were streaked with soot, their movements frantic as they worked to lay down hoses and create fire breaks. One of them spotted Angelina and ran over, waving her away. "Ma'am, you can't be here. It's not safe," he shouted over the roar of the flames. "I'm here to help," she replied firmly. "Have you seen any civilians in the area?" The firefighter hesitated, clearly torn between following protocol and accepting her assistance. Finally, he nodded. "There's an apartment building 2 blocks over. We think some people might still be inside, but we can't spare anyone to check. The fire's moving too fast." "I'll go," Angelina said without hesitation. "Just tell me where it is." The firefighter looked at her in disbelief. "You're not serious." "I'm very serious. Now point me in the right direction." After a moment's pause, he sighed and pointed. "East on this street, then take a left. It's the only 4-story building in the area. Be careful, the fire's already reached the lower floors." "Got it." She turned to Max. "Come on, boy." Together, they sprinted toward the apartment building. As they approached, Angelina's heart sank. The structure was in worse shape than she'd anticipated. Flames licked at the first and second floors, and smoke poured out of broken windows. The fire was spreading upward rapidly, and it was only a matter of time before the entire building was consumed. Angelina paused at the entrance, assessing the situation. The front door was ajar, but the heat radiating from the interior was intense. She crouched down and turned to Max. "Stay close to me, okay? Let's find them quickly." Max barked once in acknowledgement, his tail stiff with focus. Inside, the air was thick and suffocating. Angelina pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth, trying to filter out some of the smoke. She could barely see a few feet ahead, but Max's sharp senses guided them. He sniffed the air, then began moving purposefully toward the staircase. "Good boy," Angelina murmured, following him. The stairs creaked ominously under their weight as they climbed to the third floor. Here, the smoke was even denser, and the heat was almost unbearable. Angelina called out, her voice hoarse. "Is anyone here? Can you hear me?" Faint voices answered from the end of the hallway. Angelina's pulse quickened as she moved toward the sound. She found a family of 4 huddled in a corner, their faces pale and streaked with tears. The parents clutched their 2 young children tightly, shielding them from the worst of the smoke. "We're here to help," Angelina said, kneeling beside them. "Can you walk?" The father nodded, though his movements were sluggish. "The kids, they're so scared," he said, his voice breaking. Angelina placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're going to get you all out of here. I promise." She helped the mother to her feet and handed her the younger child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. The father carried the older boy, who clung to him tightly, his small hands clutching his father's shirt. Angelina led the way, with Max keeping close to the family. As they descended the stairs, a loud crack echoed through the building, followed by a shower of sparks. The fire had reached the 3rd floor, and the structure was beginning to weaken. Angelina quickened her pace, urging the family to move faster. "Almost there," she called out, though her own lungs burned with every breath. They reached the ground floor, just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending a wave of heat and debris through the hallway. Angelina shielded the family with her body, feeling the sting of flying embers against her skin. Max barked frantically, urging them to keep moving. Finally, they burst out into the open air, coughing and gasping. The firefighter from earlier spotted them and ran over, helping the family to safety. Angelina collapsed onto the pavement, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. "You're insane," the firefighter said, though his tone was more awed than critical. "But thank you. You saved them." Angelina managed a weak smile. "Just doing what I can." Max nudged her hand with his nose, his eyes filled with concern. She scratched behind his ears, grateful for his unwavering loyalty. "You're amazing, you know that," she whispered. The moment of respite was short-lived. Another firefighter approached, his expression grim. "We've got reports of more people trapped in a community center about a mile from here. It's right in the path of the fire. If we don't get them out now—" "Where is it?" Angelina asked, already standing. The firefighter hesitated. "You don't have to do this. We can send a team. You're already stretched thin," she replied. "Just tell me where to go." He sighed and pointed. "Head down Main Street, then take a right on Cedar. It's the old brick building with the green roof." "Got it. Let's go, Max." The community center was a sprawling, 2-story building that had once been a hub of activity. Now, it stood as a looming shadow against the fiery backdrop, its walls already scorched by the encroaching flames. Angelina and Max arrived to find a group of terrified people huddled near the entrance, their faces lit by the eerie glow of the fire. "Is everyone okay?" Angelina asked, scanning the group. "There are more people inside," an older woman said, her voice trembling. "Some of them couldn't make it out. The smoke, it's too much." Angelina nodded. "Stay here. We'll get them out." Max led the way into the building, his movements cautious but determined. The interior was a maze of hallways and rooms, many of them filled with choking smoke. Angelina's flashlight cut through the haze, illuminating the frightened faces of those still trapped inside. She found a group of teenagers in a recreation room, their faces pale and their breath shallow. "Follow me," she instructed, guiding them toward the exit. Max stayed at the rear, herding the stragglers and barking encouragement. One by one, Angelina and Max cleared the building, rescuing everyone they could find. By the time they emerged for the final time, the fire was dangerously close, its heat searing their skin even from a distance. The evacuees had gathered a safe distance away, watching anxiously as the flames consumed the community center. Angelina joined them, her body aching and her clothes singed, but her spirit unbroken. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the fire's relentless advance began to slow. firefighters had managed to establish containment lines, and the inferno that had seemed unstoppable just hours earlier was finally losing its strength. The survivors huddled together, their faces a mix of exhaustion and gratitude as they watched the flames retreat. Angelina sat on the edge of the group, Max resting at her feet. She ran a hand through his fur, her mind replaying the events of the night. They had saved lives, but the cost had been great. Entire neighborhoods lay in ashes, their memories reduced to smoldering ruins. A firefighter approached her, offering a bottle of water. "You did good out there," he said. "Not many people would have done what you did." Angelina took the water with a nod, her throat too raw to speak. She looked down at Max, who met her gaze with unwavering loyalty. Together, they had faced the abyss and emerged on the other side. As the sun rose higher, casting its light over the charred landscape, Angelina felt a flicker of hope. The fire might have taken much, but it hadn't taken everything. There was still time to rebuild, to heal, and to prepare for whatever came next. And she knew, without a doubt, that she and Max would be ready. Thank you for being a part of this heart-pounding journey. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep sharing incredible tales like this one.